welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill, and in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about proactively managing evergreen change in Microsoft 365. So as many of you will know, the volume of changes in 365 has grown massively. We're going to come to you with some stats during this webinar, but by 65% year on year. And for Microsoft Copilot, James is going to come in with some stats on this, but it's jumped to 102%. So whether you're part of a small organization or a global enterprise, the challenge is the same, which is how do you stay on top of those hundreds or even thousands of changes each year, many of which arrive with little warning and are enabled by default. So today I'm joined by two people who are going to help us unpick this. We're joined by James Rodd, who's co-founder and CEO of ChangePilot by Empowering Cloud. James launched the company in 2022 to help law firms proactively manage and maintain Microsoft 365, particularly around those changes and updates published by Microsoft. And I'm also joined by Ali Ward, who is Microsoft 365 Product and Platform Services Manager at Norton Rose Fulbright. She's responsible for the Microsoft stack, end user computing and identity and access management across 365 and Azure. I should say she's speaking here in her personal capacity. It's not an official endorsement, but she is someone who uses and gets great benefit from ChangePilot and is really keen to talk to you about it. So actually, I think that's probably about as good as it gets. So hi, James, and hi, Ali.
Hi, Caroline.
Really, thank you so much for joining me. For those of you listening in, please jump in with your questions as we go, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So did I do, is there anything I've left out of the introductions that either of you think that you would want to want people to know about you before we jump into some of the challenges? Or actually, perhaps I should say, just in terms of the agenda, just so that people can, sorry, cutting you off. But so we're going to be talking about the challenges, so the volume of changes. Ali and James are going to be telling you more about that. We'll be talking about the importance of managing change, so some of the repercussions if you don't, and taking a really deep dive into that. We're going to be talking about practical steps forward, including a look at ChangePilot and how Ali's using it. Ali's going to give us a demo of, first of all, how she used to do things manually and now how she does things in a more automated way. And then lastly, James is going to have a look at do some forward looking at what's coming down the track for the product. We've also got Q&A at the end. We normally take questions throughout. Apologies, I sort of asked you and then interrupted you. Anything I've left off the table?
No, not from my side, Caroline. It's been super helpful. I think the little bit extra on the background because it a little bit of weight behind why we do it and what this is all about. So the Empowering Cloud business, some will know my business partner Tom. There's a huge kind of community focus there under empowering.cloud, and then we have the commercial proposition, which is ChangePilot. So for those interested in following just what's going on, regular updates, news and insights in 365, then have a look at the empowering.cloud side. It's all community, and it was through that side of the organization that we spoke to lots of companies, not just the legal sector, but enterprises across multiple sectors and multiple parts of the planet. And it highlighted that headache of staying on top of the volume of change of these cloud systems. Now we know the Microsoft one, so that's what we focused on as a first pass of trying to find a solution. And the facts and stats, as Caroline kind of touched on earlier, and I've got several I can refer to throughout the call as to why it's an important thing. But I think if Ali's okay, it'd be worth Ali kind of chipping in and kind of telling us why it's important from your point of view. And I put that in two categories. One is the importance of managing change, because that's important. And then obviously from a little bit more of a selfish perspective is why using ChangePilot can help that process.
Well, let's start with the challenges. So the volume of changes, actually in a second, jump in, James, with your some more stats. But so Ali, you're at the coalface, as it were. Talk us through from your perspective, sort of the challenge around the sheer volume of changes and what that looks like from your perspective.
Okay, so hi. I did a count of my changes since March, since I've got the stats to do it based on now. I've had something like 1,700 changes come through my tenant since March. So, average like over a year, you're getting to sort of 2,500 or so, but in my particular tenant. I work for a firm that's got about 10,000 people in it. So, and they're lawyers. The lawyers don't like change at the best of times. They don't like things breaking. They don't like things changing in front of them. So if I just ignore some of this stuff, it can just suddenly, it can break things. It can change things. Think about new Teams. That was a completely new interface. Think about new Outlook. If you get moved over to new Outlook automatically because Microsoft thinks that's a great idea, and in a lot of ways it is, but there's things that won't work anymore, especially in a firm like mine. We've got various add-ins. They don't currently work in new Outlook. So managing that change is absolutely essential, because otherwise you end up with tickets. You end up with upset users that don't know, that they're just going to blame IT. IT have done stuff, and it won't matter to them what it is that's done it. It's just IT have done it, and why haven't they told me? Why haven't they done something about it? That's one side of it. And then the other side is compliance. What Microsoft used to do, and Tom and I have talked about this quite a lot, James, is about that they used to turn things, they sort of roll them out default off. So firms like mine that are all about compliance and privacy and everything else, they default it off and we could choose to turn it on. The trouble is with that doesn't get a great deal of adoption. If it's default off, it's a lot easier to just leave it off. So what's taken to happen much more recently is that the things are defaulted on, which means sometimes changes drop that have an impact of a behavior that we're just not going to want in our environment. There was something recent, turned out not to happen, but there was something recently that was around, it was to do with being able to message people. It would send you an email and it would sort of, rather than just message you in Teams, and we block that. We don't let anyone outside the firm do that unless we've explicitly said, yes, you can. And that was going to drop, turned on. And it's managing that change, managing the expectation, managing the compliance, managing the privacy. There was another one recent, not so very long ago now, where Microsoft are changing the way OneDrive is paid for. If your people leave your organization, a lot of firms have done what they do is they sort of leave those accounts there, but they don't license them, take licenses away. And Microsoft have not unreasonably said, well, you're taking up space in our Azure. We want to charge for that. And suddenly you've got, well, if you're not paying attention to the messages, either going to delete that stuff that you were expecting to be sitting there, even though it wasn't licensed, or if you've got archive internal, it's going to start costing you a lot of money. Either way, there's financial or compliance or other implications. So it's not all of the messages. It's by no means not even most of the messages, but there's a handful of them every month that you've got to do something about, because if you don't, you're going to have an impact somewhere in your organization. And when you get to an enterprise level, get more than about 500, maybe 1,000 people, you can't afford to have that sort of disruption because it's just too hard to walk back from it.
I can't imagine with an organisation your side. We got caught out by the big Copilot change. I think when they changed the interface of 365, and just from a small company, I mean we'll come back to your point about the way that people respond and that relationship, because I do think that you sort of think, well, what's happened? Something's gone wrong, and why is this here? And it's I can imagine when you multiply that. When did they start bringing the default changes in?
I don't know, James. It's probably a couple of years now, isn't it? It's been a little while.
Yeah, this is the clarity of the information you get from Microsoft is challenging at times. It's a big block of text written by developers and coders primarily, so it's quite hard to unpick. There's definitely, since Copilot launched, especially, and Microsoft got a real push for, on a positive side, organizations to use the technology they're licensed for. That's the reason why, is, as we know, people are reluctant to change. But one of the benefits of cloud and evergreen is that it's always being evolved. Now, the downside is you can't plan for that. You just have to take it. So we've seen a big increase in the last 12 months, but certainly over the last pretty much 24 months of Copilot coming through. And it's, that the 3 statuses shipped from Microsoft. And as Ali said, I think the classification we get is around about 35 to 38% of changes you really should look at. The rest are a bit more than for information only in some cases, but then down to that sort of level, and that's still quite high. You're definitely in the hundreds and hundreds of it every year. But that shipping as on by default has really been driven out of Microsoft's drive for adoption.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about Copilot thinking about it. It's when they moved to Copilot, you have to have current channel or monthly channel. So that's from round about the end of 21 into 22. It's with that. So firms like mine used to say we're on semi-annual, which means every 6 months we would test and then we would roll it out. So the users didn't get things dropped. But with Copilot, we've increasingly said, all right, well, we're going to move to the monthly channel. And I think Microsoft are not unreasonably said, well, people are much more used to that level of change, so we can push more of it and we can have more of that level of change, and perhaps it will default more of it on because people are going to be more accepting of it. They're in a different world. And I get the logic, but it's not always easy to work with.
I just say it does kind of work, but there's also there is a commercial element to it. So the proper Copilot licensing is a cost. It is an extra. So the more people using it, the better that is for Microsoft commercially. It does add value to an organization, but it does put the emphasis on how organizations use it. It's less than half of the updates communicated. I'm sure, Valley, you've seen this. Live, it's about a third of current Copilot related updates are actually flagged as Copilot. The others it's Copilot in another product. So if you're the person responsible for the Copilot rollout, you only have direct visibility of less than half the updates and changes coming through, unless you're looking across all of the different products and services. So it's like things like Copilot in Teams or in SharePoint or in Outlook, etc. So that's quite tricky. And as Ali said in her intro, actually, it's quite the exposure around risk and compliance with some of those features and functions, certainly around letting AI loose in your environment, is quite tough. But that's not to detract, and this is something I've noticed working with a bunch of law firms, is actually data management, location management are all things that have changed recently, either the cost impact or a compliance impact. So the Wi-Fi location in Germany more recently has been a real headache, because that got proposed as being turned on by default. So there's lots more in the general kind of Office 365 suite, which comes in and bites people on the backside if they're not careful. But yeah, so it's definitely it's not a one person, one fixed solution, is it, Ali?
No, it's not, and this, responding to it is very nuanced depending on the organisation size, number of people they've got to deal with it. My previous firm had 400,000 people. It had a huge IT team. It had Outlook team and a Teams team and a SharePoint team and whatever else. I've got 3 in my team, and we're it. And we still have to do exactly the same thing. And then there'll be firms that are smaller than mine that maybe got 1 person, and they're not just managing the change. They're also rolling out updates to desktops, and they're doing all those other things. So there's a need to stay on top of it, because you can't afford to not, but equally not make it too much effort.
What are the stats, James? You know, in terms of the volume of changes, so it's increasing, isn't it? Fair to say.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because Ali gets quite a lot, more than the average, actually. So it's rare that I would reduce numbers when I'm trying to talk about the importance of this. But the sheer volume is one thing, and then the rate of increase is another. And then on top of the rate of increase is the rate of changes to these updates, just for consideration. So yeah, the average tenant, if we say in 2024, had a total of 1,500 new items on average last year. Whereas that's increased this year. We haven't finished the year. We're kind of at 10 and a half months in. It had broken 2,100 total messages. So well over a 65% increase year to date of new items. And the other bit, which is often tricky to keep up with, is the amount of times that Microsoft then make a change to those updates. So far this year, having asked somebody to check me this morning, is over 1,000 of those items have had subsequent changes. Now, some of those are a little bit of grammar or a bit of a spell check, because that happens, but quite often it's a date slippage. And so if you're planning for a change to take effect in an organization, and you never know exactly when it's going to affect your tenant, it's just coming within a window typically. But if I have 1,000 items, that's more than half of what's out there is going to have a subsequent change thereafter. You can't just look once. You have to look at this stuff regularly. Utopia, and even Microsoft themselves would say on a daily basis, and they have a change maturity model, that if anybody wants a Microsoft reference point of why you should do this, then they've gone out of their way to publish that. So that's quite a bit of a headache. But then, I think you mentioned, Caroline, in your introduction, the Copilot changes are up over 100%. The security changes are up over 80% year on year. So if one of the questions we often get asked is, why are IT teams so busy? And quite often it's the sheer volume of those that is coming through, and it's not slowing down. You've had a 50% increase in noise just from Microsoft. A little bit of context on that is Microsoft 365. That's about 70-ish different products and services that sit within the Microsoft suite of families, and Teams is one of those, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. They're all single items in that list of 72. Most people won't recognise, more than half that list, but it's pretty widespread. So Ali's small team does quite a job to keep the business informed of what's coming.
So thanks for that. So yeah, and Ali, you mentioned already some of the, in terms of the potential repercussions. So you already said about might have if it's Teams, it might have a different interface with Outlook, might have the add-ins might stop working, or things that users are used to being there aren't there anymore. I have to tell you, I'm a former lawyer, and I still think like a lawyer in terms of technology, which is sometimes why I have empathy and I know what it's like. And these things, they can cause absolute mass confusion, can't they? And it's interesting, in terms of the repercussions in terms of time and how that equates to money. I think that's when it starts to get quite interesting, doesn't it? And you must have seen that in terms of when you get these changes, if they do, would it be like if they slip through or whatever, or perhaps, I suppose change is inevitable, isn't it, anyway? But the changes can cause a big repercussion in terms of if you're taking, like, for example, a 6-minute unit, and that's multiplied across the firm, that's quite a lot of money that you could potentially lose in terms of people trying to get on top of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so imagine the change to new teams, and then eventually they decremented classic teams. So if you hadn't done that change, you weren't paying attention to it, your users will just be ignoring messages that pop up on it, and then suddenly one day Teams doesn't work. Imagine the consequence of that you're no longer able to do the chat or anything else. Or, as I say, the Outlook, if accidentally you let your company move over to new Outlook and you're not ready to do it, you haven't made sure that you're in a position of doing it, suddenly your users, in my case lawyers, they can't file their emails where they're supposed to be filing them into the document management system. They can't access their legal tools. They're all embedded into Outlook. There's potentially productivity issues there for doing it. I mean, there's kind of worst case, and that's definitely a very small proportion of them, but it only takes one, and suddenly you are the bad guy because you didn't catch it.
Yeah. If you take that, we've obviously from our side helping organizations build business cases, and it's that, there's a lost billing potential if you distract. It's just 1% of high impacting end user changes, because you do have to split, but there are some changes which affect the admin and the technical team at the back end, and there are other changes which directly affect the users without the ability for the IT team to do anything about it. So the flow into corporate comms or end user adoption and training teams is as important. If you just missed 1% of the changes, of the high impacting changes, as in it's likely to cause a headache, well, that's up to 4 items. Yep. So you missed 4 changes, but if you multiply that up through the volume of lawyers, it doesn't take much to miss a 6-minute billing increment, a few hundred times, and that justifies spending the time looking at this proactively. So there's definitely a lost billing potential, which is kind of the big scary one if you say it in front of lawyers. There's lost productivity, which affects everybody, not just the billable lawyers. You've got the downstream pollution as well. We often talk about what happens if you don't manage change. A lot of firms don't, they haven't got a process. They just try their luck, and principally it does what IT has always done, which is, oh, my system's broken, let me call the service desk. And wouldn't it be nice if that was avoidable? And we can honestly say in a lot of cases it is avoidable. You just have to shift the effort up front and say, manage the change which is communicated proactively, and you will save the business all sorts of pain lower down the line, from service desk to productivity to user engagement to ultimately the business's trust in IT. If you give them something that works and doesn't break and doesn't have issues, and you can avoid all these little kind of scare stories, then you're in a much, much stronger position. So.
And of course, you're making it easier for your IT staff as well. So doing what I'm doing, I'm sharing that information with the wider team, so they've got a chance of doing the prep that they need to do. So it's not just the end user, it's the admin, check and make sure, one of these things will drop, and I'll run all the reports off to see, okay, well, how much of this is affecting me? Oh, look, we've got these various things. They're going to stop working in the middle of April or something. You've got this long to go and remediate them. So it gives my teams time to plan their workloads as well, to deal with the things that need dealing with before. And generally, Microsoft gives you, up to a year's notice of the really impacting changes, quite often, not always, but quite often. But you need to actually proactively do something about it and not wait till it hits. So it allows my teams to plan the effort to sort stuff out as well.
We're going to come on to do that comparison of that manual versus automated using ChangePilot, which I'm interested to see. Just coming back real quick to the OneDrive, you mentioned really briefly about the change to OneDrive. Let's go dive into that a tiny bit more, because that's quite surprising, isn't it? That they previously, because it's not just financial costs actually around that. That's a sort of, I suppose, data privacy issues as well.
Yeah. Okay. So that particular change, to bring it to life, is that we have, with a Microsoft 365 stack, you've generally got OneDrive. OneDrive is where you're storing your day-to-day files, individual users storing their day-to-day files. And if you're licensed of them, Microsoft give you, I want to say it's up to about a terabyte per person or something. What 1 gigabyte? I can't remember what the amount is. Anyway, they give you a set amount, and you can use that space. It's as long as they're licensed. When people leave the firms like mine, most firms, I suspect, the person's left and you don't know what files they had and that you might need. So there's a tendency to want it to stay there for, ideally only sort of 30 days, but often a lot longer than that, because, if this is the CEO of the company, or maybe, CIO, or someone quite senior, a partner, whatever else, you don't know who's been communicating with them. So there's a tendency to want that information available. The easy way that people have certainly done in the past, many firms, is to just take the license away, so you're not paying the license for it anymore, and that data stayed there. It stayed there kind of indefinitely, obviously taking up a lot of space. So not unreasonably, Microsoft said, okay, well, you can keep this data, but if you keep it, you've got to archive it. And they've given a large amount of notice that you need, I think they started saying from the beginning of this year, you need to archive this or you're going to lose it. So there's going to come a point at which that data that was there, that was just sitting there after 90 days when you've left, that data is going to either go away, or you turn on billing, and a lot of people may have archive turned on anyway, and this that you weren't paying for is now going to start getting billed. And it sounds quite small. It was something like 20 cents per gigabytes or something, but when you've got terabytes of data, that really quickly adds up. I can't remember what the amount was, but it really quickly adds up to quite a lot of money, especially for the larger firms, that suddenly you're either getting a bill or that data's going away. And Microsoft have provided some tools. You can do something about it. You can clean it up, you can move, you can restore, you can do things about it, but you need to know in advance of that dropping and make those changes in order to knowingly respond to that change.
Yeah. And then, so, okay, fine. So in terms of, thank you. So in terms of steps forward, so, I mean, James, you've already touched a little bit on, so if you're using Message Center or Microsoft Planner, like, even if you're working super hard, it's sometimes quite hard to see all the changes anyway, because they're all kind of mixed into one another. You were just saying that Copilot changes might actually be sort of it's easy to miss stuff. So do you want to talk through, both of you, perhaps, just before Ali jumps into her demo, which I know we're all keen to see? So just talk us through how, I don't know about you, but I learn by seeing stuff. But just talk us through in advance, how perhaps the kind of the manual versus the automated ChangePilot process will work, and then we'll dive into the demo.
I think the demo is probably just going to do it all justice, Caroline. Honestly, yeah, from what Ali will show you, Ali's going to show what she was doing before. There's a premise of, there's some built-in functionality. I say that now, if there's any value from this as a whole, I would, just encourage everybody to look at change proactively. And step one of that, if Ali gets ready to jump into the demo, step one is by regularly looking at the Message Center. The Message Center is unique to each organization's tenant. It's about 81% of all items are common across tenants. To give you an idea, which means 19% of the items in your personal or your business tenant rather are unique to that tenant. It's based on geographies, licensing, usage, etc. But there's obviously there's quite a chunk of extra which is specific to you. There's also the roadmap service from Microsoft. So the roadmap is a general roadmap for everybody to see. So everybody sees the same roadmap, and it's typically a good few months out in terms of what's coming. But Message Center is what's coming pretty soon, within the next few weeks to few months, and that'll get to you. So step one is look at that Message Center environment. Step two is there's some native integration you can do with Planner and with Teams, just to allow Message Center to send you some information. It is a weekly email as well, isn't there, Ali? I think that you can configure, and that picks up the data from the Message Center and sends it to you, and then you spend some time sorting out that data, trying to deciphering how important it is, when it's going to affect you, and who needs to know about it. So that's pretty much where Ali came from and the amount of time Ali spent managing that process. And then so where we step in is to kind of pick it up from that point and say, right, how do we add additional value to that process, and how do we take away that manual overhead? And one of the big things is managing the ongoing changes, is the ratings, the rankings, the importance to the users, the importance to the admin teams, and build that out. But I'm sure as Ali goes through this, a picture paints 1,000 words. So if you're okay, Ali, do you want to share and kind of chat that through?
And also, just to say to the people listening, if you've got questions as Ali does the demo, just jump in and we'll just, when she's done, we'll ask. So by all means, just ask in the chat.
Okay. Right. So this is the Message Center, and we might as well start with that. This is the Message Center that James was just talking about, where all of your various messages drop, and that you can see they're organized by service, by when they were last updated. So you can, if you want, just go through this every day and try and do it that way. You can filter these by, I've never even tried doing it because it's quite hard to manage it here. You can just go and look and see what the individual item is on it, what's it all about. You can just read it. If you want to do nothing else, you can. Equally, you can configure your notifications so you get an email of whichever ones of these service that you want to do. So that's the Message Center. As James says, there is a native integration that you can do to Planner. So you can turn on a switch in SharePoint, I think it is, and it will drop these automatically into one of the buckets in here. Now, what I did, this is what I used to do with it. I had a bit of Power Automate that looks at these every day, 3 o'clock every day, whatever, and then decides, okay, well, which buckets do they belong into? So I organize them there into the various buckets, and you'll see I've also added tags. So I've used the Power Automate to pick up whether it's a new feature, stay informed, just to make it a little easier to see on it exactly what it is. I can add my own tags in here as well, so I can tag them for my technical working group. I'll come back to that. And then you can go into and see just a little bit more information about it and what bucket it's in. It picks up a start date, but it's not the start date that Microsoft have been given. I mean, if Microsoft did nothing else, it'd been marvelous if they put this date into a standard format so you can do something about it. But anyway, you get normally a when will this happen, and then you get something that looks a bit like that, but not always exactly like that, to work out exactly what's going on and how it's going to roll out on it. So what you can do in here is you can allocate these to individual people. So you can, if you want to, if you do nothing else, you can pull them into this planner in here, put them into buckets, and then if you've got teams that are responsible, as you can see, for Teams or Exchange or whatever else, you can say, okay, that's your bucket. Or you can individually, within your bucket, go through and then, assign a person to each of them to give ownership on it. So it's entirely doable. This is certainly the way we used to do this in my old firm. Oh gosh, long time ago, five or so years ago. It works depending on the size of your team. You may find this is adequate, especially if you're accustomed to using Planner. You can do something about it. The challenge with this, though, is what James was saying, is the amount of updates you get. So you can go through these, do whatever you want to do, and then close them because you dealt with them. And then Microsoft will change the data on it and it'll open again. You've got to be going backwards and forwards on it to say, oh, another one's open. Oh, I've seen it now. seeing what the update is. Right, I'm going to close it again. So it's an ongoing task to stay on top, but it is doable. Seen it done in the past. It's just challenging. Depends on the size of your team. This may be sufficient on it. I'm not sure anything else I wanted to show on that. I guess the only other thing I wanted to say about this, for me, we don't really use Planner. I like Planner. I think it's a great tool, but it's not the place that everyone else worked. So what I had started to do anyway was I would copy each one of these. I'd basically go and get the message center item, and I'd go to the message center, because you'll see you don't get the images on here. You can't. It doesn't sync it that way. You've got the attachments, but it doesn't sync the images. And I wanted it all visible in one place. So I would then copy it into Teams, into my knowledge sharing team. So you can see I've got the same sort of buckets on there, and I would copy them in with all the information on it. But I would also, I don't know if I've got images of that. So I'd copy in the images and everything else from Message Center, so it's easy to see. And then I've had a load of tags on here. So for those people probably realize you can tag people. So my Teams SMEs, my Windows SMEs. So I would go through and decide who needs to know about this. Does anyone need to know about it? And I'd tag them in there, and sometimes put an additional comment in there as to, what I thought about it, what I was doing about it. And that, of course, then means that you can have an ongoing conversation about it. So you'll see I've also tagged the change management team there for this one. I wonder how many people want to know anything about it. So I'd comment on it, and then you can see what we were doing was every time it got updated, we were updating that availability in it. So a manual task, it used to take approximately a day a week to stay on top of this. It was about a day a week just to do this bit. And then from there, this is the initial triage. I then had to think, okay, well, which ones do we really want to look into? For having done that triage, I would also then be tagging things for my technical working group. And that technical working group, I'd sort of say, well, these are the key ones. These are the ones we need to worry about of them. And I'd share it through that meeting. So from here, I had to generate an agenda of exactly the ones I want to talk about, shortlist them down, paste them into the agenda, and walk through them in the meeting. So again, probably about another half day to get to that point of being able to do that technical working group on it, and creating an agenda on it for each one of them, with every one of those things, and what did we need to know about them, particular issues on them. Doesn't matter what the individual ones were, but this is my OneNote where I track all of those. So that was the way I used to do it. And Tom and I
say that was effort. That's not out of the box, is it, Ali? That was you building a system around some of the tooling which is available out of the box. So the planner integration gets you so far, then Ali's taking it further.
In one box. Yeah. It's a bit of Power Automate. Once you built it, it does it. This has stayed working for about 3 years without me touching it, to be fair. It works if you can work within Planner. Yeah, there's a lot of manual effort in this, and it probably was between a day to a day and a half a week between me and my team just to stay on top of this, and it's time we could ill afford, frankly.
That is very time consuming.
Yeah, but back to the original conversation, essential, because I can't afford to have some of these key things dropping that are going to break something or cost us money or mess with compliance, or just adjust the user interface sufficiently that it makes the users uncomfortable enough that they raise tickets on it. Any of those things, I can't afford for those to be happening. So it's time that needs to be spent on it, because the consequences just aren't good.
And the cost and the time and cost of unraveling it is also quite enormous as well.
Yeah, I mean, if once it goes wrong, it's just not worth the noise for some of that as well. And of course, some of these are super important, and they actually need a senior leadership visibility as well. So that's the other thing I would do on these. Sometimes I'd tag them for my senior leadership. So that's a monthly report of ongoing changes that they actually need some leadership and some information on, need some decisions as to what we want to do about things sometimes. So That was the old way of doing it. As I say, it then got posted through into my teams. So Tom and I had a conversation. I can't remember exactly where it started, but we had a lengthy conversation about just what my process was, and I'm going to take a little bit of credit for some of the thought process that went behind the beginning of ChangePilot. But yeah, sharing a common problem that needs solving. So what I have now with ChangePilot then, so let's bring that one to life, is that ChangePilot automatically post them into, in fact, let's go into ChangePilot. Let's go and have a look at one of these ones. That doesn't matter. In fact, let's choose a Teams one. There'll be more on those. So ChangePilot now automatically posts them into Teams, again, in the same sort of buckets that I had before. I get the information about what the change is, what bucket it belongs in, is it a plan for change or an impacting change, whether it's medium. And this is quite useful because I get it, impact on user, impact on admin. That's a value add that I've got now. So how much am I likely to be able to care about? I'm going to read it. I'm going to look at it. I've worked in this world for 30 odd years. I've been working on the Microsoft stack for 13 years or so. So I've actually got quite a broad knowledge, but not everyone has that knowledge of exactly where it's going to impact. So these sorts of things are very useful to understand the impact of them. And then that deploying start and end dates on them, again, really, really useful. I get a few bullets on exactly what is the change. It's just basically pulling out what's it all about, what's the summary of it. I want to know some more information about it. I can pull up the portal, so I can now go and look and see, okay, well, what exactly did Microsoft say? What's the details on it, which works quite well. I also, within that, what I'll do is I'll have a look at, okay, well, what do I want to do about that? Actually, I'll come on to the process in a minute. The other thing that comes with this is you can see the updates that James was just talking about. ChangePilot will say, okay, there's been an update there, and then look, there's been another update there. 1 day, 2 days after it dropped on the Tuesday. Yeah, 2 days later we've had an update. The day after that we've had an update, and then you can see my team starting to interact with it and think, what do they want to do about it as well? So particularly useful for that. Some of these also have a link to. I wonder if I've got one here. Might have. Link to a video. Yes. Okay. So Power and Cloud do a video of all of the major impacting changes, so you can link and get a quick someone talking about what the impacting things are for a particular issue. That's quite useful.
Ali, how do you tell in this where the updates come from? Sorry, I'm not familiar with this, so forgive me if it's really obvious to everybody else, but obviously you've got a lot of information. How do you flag where the update's from? Is this
what do you mean where the updates are from?
Well, so if you're flagging that there's an update, so this is all obviously, but
ChangePilot's doing it. So ChangePilot's automatically doing a reply to the original post. It's posting the replies to it. Every single time there's an update, it gets updated. So here, if you look in, this is the process that I'm using to manage it. Let's not worry about those ones. Let's go back to, you normally go to what's unread. So there we go. So it was in an early one. Yeah, there you go. ChangePilot replied to a message. So I get notifications every time it's been updated, as well as when it's been posted new on there for any of the updates on it. So I will go through my unread activity on a very regular basis, at least twice a week, sometimes more than that, to see, okay, well, what do I want to do about any of these? So if it's just ChangePilot replied, I'm looking, oh, well, it's a change in date. Sometimes it's we've cancelled the change. Sometimes it's that they've changed the whole scope of it. You have to read it to see what it is, but I will go through all of those. And then I will go through these unread. Basically, this unread is how I manage it each time, and to see exactly, well, what do I want to do about it?
So it stays within its thread, as it were. So it's very easy, much easier to keep on top of where the change pertains to.
Yeah, it's worth saying, so as part of the process here in terms of looking at those message center items for each tenant is the review of those. So we use a mixture of there's a bit of AI tooling that helps summarize and split out the dates and the topics and those individual items. There's a database that sits behind this, and we always update. We look at the changes when they come through from Microsoft. Now, if they're relevant changes like dates or descriptions or specific services, then we update that database so the core information source stays current. So you have that. And then we track the history of those changes so that when the team or the people responsible look at it, they say, I looked at this 3 weeks ago. Why is it back in my inbox again? And go, right, well, it's changed, but the data's changed, the impact rating has changed. We filter out the noise. If it's just a typo correction, or if it's just a reordering of something that isn't necessary, then we get rid of that. So we start clearing the noise away at that point, but giving the history, that's an auditable history of the changes for each item. Then it helps the service owners stay on top of what is happening at what stage. And it's worth just bouncing back while I'm talking for a second on we run a monthly call that's live as an in-person. It's a multi-customer call. It's run by an MVP and master who spends up to a couple of hours reviewing those primary changes. So you can join it live if you want to, but equally we record that, chapter mark it, and then as Ali was just showing there, a link will appear once that call has happened to jump straight to that particular area. So when your team gets ready to review it, you've obviously got the data, you've got the summary, you've got the original information, and you have the option of another individual, an expert in their field, talking you through that change as well. So it just speeds up the understanding and the ultimate impact on the business to make those decisions.
I'm just going to jump in real quick with a question, just because obviously we want to, make sure we have time for it. Someone in your team has already answered it, but just for the benefit, in case you want to add anything. So thanks for the question. Can ChangePilot do the same sort of updates to a list, or does it only work for teams? I don't know if you want to jump in. There's obviously, thank you for answering that in the chat, but do either of you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, so Ali's going to show an element of how it can be managed. So the current version that Ali's using, we drop the information into a SharePoint list, which is the primary database source. We also have one law firm actually who manages their process through the SharePoint list to make the appropriate kind of status changes and allocation changes. We also have a Power App that sits within Teams as well, and that allows you to manage that process through from a Power App kind of workflow. This is that view. I'll let Ali talk about that quickly, and then we'll possibly come back to what we're doing in the future in a second, make sure we do some justice. So it's the information push is everything that Ali's shown you so far that ChangePilot does. This is how we then manage that workflow, or give you a platform to manage, how you stay on top of the change and roll it into the business.
Yeah, so it's already in a list. It's just being surfaced into Teams in this way. And what I do is the ones that I want to do something more about, I change the status on them to discuss. So I can change it to a variety of things, but I either put it to discuss, or once I've done that, if I've got things that I've got ongoing that I want to keep open and not close, I'll change them to in review. The other thing I can do is I will also tag them for my technical working group. I'll tag them for my CIOs, so I can have multiple tags, whatever I want. I've custom some of these. My Copilot steering group, I've got a particular section of the many messages that come through that are of interest to a specific Copilot steering group rather than to the rest of the world. So I tag them, and then I manage them through my meetings by a series of these tags and statuses on them. So I'll go through the workbook on whatever I've got on any of these on the day that I'm running my meetings, and I'll talk about them. I'll open it up in Teams, or I'll open it up in the portal that I was just showing, and talk about it, decide what we want to do about it, and then either close it or put it into some other status on it, which works particularly well on it. And I think one thing James and I were saying the other day was that I kind of keep ownership of what I'm doing here. The way my firm works is it's sort of delegated responsibility. So my regions have got responsibility to make their own changes. In some firms, you won't have that. You actually want to say, this team do that, this team do something else. And James, I don't know if you want to talk about your upcoming changes so that you can now apply owners to this as well.
Yeah,
that's our last. We've got plenty of time. So yeah, that's the last sort of bit. So if anyone wants to jump in as well on any other questions, do. But yeah, James. So in terms of, you talking about roadmap then?
Yes. I mean, having done this now for it's probably been about 18 months in the market, 2 years since inception from a session with Ali and a bunch of other peers a couple of years ago. So we're looking at this is version 2. We're looking at the version 3 launch in January. And in terms of where that list sits, we're shifting the architecture to a Dataverse architecture that allows some extra technical capabilities, for want of drilling down into that too far. It allows for individual allocation. So there's kind of Entra and AD syncing. So in this view, Ali looks at it and says, right, let's choose the items that determine the agenda, because Ali's in control of everything.
May I interrupt you, James? Are you going to share your screen, or obviously we're looking?
I wasn't going to. Just going to touch briefly. Okay. It's a big jump from where we are looking at this screen, so it's just to kind of flag and say the next version through builds in an element of auto allocation. So to save Ali having to go into each meeting step by step and choose, I want to discuss items specifically for her TWG audience, that can be a predetermined list. So she can go into a drop-down menu and say, for her sequence of review meetings with subsequent teams, here's the predetermined agenda setting items. So there's still the workflow. This is a tool that enables you to reach this level 500 of Microsoft's ambition for managing change, or their change maturity model, as they call it. If anybody wants to Google or search for that, it's the Microsoft change maturity model. So our tool allows you to operate at level 500, but behind that is the sequence and cadence of your internal review meetings and your ability to flag it to your target audiences. And so there's the full automatic auto allocation of particular items, predetermining lists and views, so that you can get to see very, very quickly. You don't have to do drop down menu options for each review stage. The tagging field that Ali's referring to, think of a tag in two ways. One is a tag, so it's an extra marker to say, hey, everybody, when you filter by this tag, you get to see items I want you to see, which is quite nice. Because of the Power Automate and the Power Platform backend, it can also kick off a workflow. And so for certain organizations, it's determining that actually TWG aren't going to join a meeting. I just want to send them a weekly email. So, if you tag it TWG email, for example, then that would kick off the automatic workflow to send them that degree of notification into an email, into a Teams message. It can also do the same into an ITSM solution like a ServiceNow, Halo, Azure DevOps, or whatever it may be. So that tag has got a dual meaning. One is a flag, the other is an action, again, automated. And another big step up is because you've got the Entra integration piece, it tracks everybody's interaction with the app and the process itself. So fully auditable, add a trail, and whenever comments and actions are made in regards to why it was moved from which status to another, or adding extra context, that comes through as well. So we're quite excited about what extra it can do. And the very last bit, because we've touched on Copilot quite a lot, is again the Dataverse piece allows Copilot, and Ali, amusingly from Thursday's conversation to what you'll probably get shown on Wednesday this week, is the ability to control it using Copilot agent commands from the Teams channel. So changing status, looking at data, you can have an entire agentic conversation using Copilot to progress where you're going with it as an app. So it started off last week. It was almost a little bit gimmicky, but by the time Ali poked us and Kev spent a few more hours on it, oh no, okay, we can. So we built out an agentic process for making some changes. So my last little last few words on this are our 3.0 release, which will be happening early in January next year. But just adds to this process. And just exciting times from our perspective. Sorry, I'll pause because we've got a few minutes left. So
no, not at all, James, not at all. And Ali, does that go towards some of the? I know you've had a big input into the product and the direction, and I know it's always great. We have chats with a lot of people in all different sectors, and invariably it is invaluable to have the type of input that you give. Does 3.0, does it go towards some of the things that you've been asking for?
Yes, hopefully. I mean, it's already made a massive difference to what I'm doing. I will say I'm quite excited about the agentic. I want to be able to do all my changes in one place. I want to just do it in Teams. I don't want to have to do anything. So be able to ChangePilot, close this, ChangePilot, mark for TWG. I don't have to be clicking on something else. That will make a difference. But to be fair, it works. It works really well, doing what it's doing, and it's reduced, from probably a day and a half's work a week between me and my team to, I don't know, couple of hours a week, to 2 to 3 hours a week, which is still, it's still not a trivial change, because I've still got to read everyone, because someone has to read everyone. You've got to decide what matters to you, what matters to your firm, but it's a lot easier to manage it now.
A lot more automated. The agentic, that sounds exciting. So you'll be able to converse. You'll be able to sort of converse in natural language and give it instructions, and then it will be able to sort of perform tasks that is properly agentic.
Yes, it is. Yeah, you'll be able to ask it, how many items are going to hit me this week or in the next month. Show me the high impacting items. Show me the open items. Show me my items in review. The bit that Ali is, it's setting that status piece. So the ability to turn around and say, okay, ChangePilot, close this item, or mark this item as to be discussed, or tag it for TWG. Imagine a process where you can predetermine those sets of actions as well, and do group a bunch of changes together and say, right, I want all of these to be flagged to this particular group. So yeah, it does get quite exciting. We have seen, it's been interesting. Ali lives and breathes in Teams, and so that's taking it in one big direction. HSF, another law firm, really supportive. They use it. They really instrumentally what that Power App interface was going to look like. And as an Irish law firm, as I say, just they live and breathe in SharePoint lists. So the premise of how you as an organization work and what your cadence is for, do you review daily? We've had conversations with banks and retail firms or customers in retail and manufacturing and engineering and education, as well as the legal sector. The premise of it is taking that information from Microsoft, simplifying it, putting it into a database so that it's way more easily filterable and sortable. So we do an AI review, we then do a human review as well. So we rely on MVPs, so very clever techie people, to go through and check the impact, make sure it's in English as good as it can be. We catch things from Microsoft that aren't very clear and go back to them and say, hey, Microsoft, we don't understand this, and if we don't, nobody will. So clean it up. And then we have the tool, and the tool is designed to build the process for you. We have customer success and onboarding and a best practice model that maps to, in fact, Darren, thank you, has dropped the link in for the change maturity model. So we have that cadence of best practice. And it depends on where you may be as a firm, as to how far along this line you are. So Ali, really well experienced in doing this, and it was quite a push to get her to change some habits. I think early doors, but
to be fair, and we had this conversation, didn't we? That I've got a bit set in the way that I do things, and I need to sometimes. Well, actually, other people might do things a different way from me, and you know what? It doesn't matter. You don't have to do it every day, but then it piles up. What you do need to do is have a cadence to do it, because I went away for a week and I came back and had then loads and loads and loads to catch up on. So there's a balance. It interrupts the flow, so you need to choose the order in which you want to do it and choose what works for you on it. And I'm a bit of a control freak, frankly. I like things done the way that they're done. I like them done my way. But this is Microsoft, and if I know nothing else about Microsoft, is there are 1,001 ways of doing anything. So do what works for you, as long as you do something, I think would be my real message on that.
Yeah,
brilliant takeaway.
And it's just that, and we're, for the firms that don't do anything or do very little but are suffering at the back end because they don't, then we just set it up to really look at those high impacting items. So you can ignore the low impacting. We'll flag any that we think are going to be business impacting, either technically or from a user perspective, and that, as I say, whittles it down to a third of the noise to focus on those. As your processes and systems mature and you get into it, then you've got that step to, I can do a bit more now because I've figured out how to stay on top of these, and you can redirect some skills and services within the team to look at this stuff proactively. And for the firms that have got a defined process and you think, well, I use Planner, why is this any different? Then take a closer look, because it'll accelerate you into dealing with the change itself, as opposed to the process to understand what that change is. And we've got, there's one process we're working through with a rather large US organization, not legal sector, but they have 100 people every week that join 3 separate calls to try and stay on top of change. And most of their effort is getting people to understand the changes. And we said, well, why don't you just accelerate past that point and have those meetings to focus on the items that matter, that are going to affect the business? And that's the value piece that we're trying to bring to this table.
Well, that seems like a brilliant place to wrap up. I mean, I think we've got time. I'm just really curious though. Is there anything that we can learn from other sectors? Like you deal with other sectors, non-legal. Is there anything that they do or that separates them?
Not necessarily by sector. The bit that's been interesting is the split between organisations. It's like is the tail wagging the dog, I suppose. So in most cases, I've come across the IT team as being the centre point for managing change. And more recently, we've had 2, one in education and one council, actually in London, so a public sector body, where it was the impact on the users that was the dog. So they were driving it forward, and it was less about, technically XYZ widget's going to change. It was, what's the impact on my users? And actually, and seeing the way that their processes worked and what they took away from it. Because you can't, just to go see the message center, for example, you have to have an admin access, which means you have to have a technical access to the admin center. So you don't give that out to somebody who's not technical, because they're going to break it. They're going to mess with something they shouldn't. That's not allowed. That's controlled. So for them being able to give them a view of that data without exposing them to the risk of the message center, then that was a huge step forward. And increasingly we're getting pushed. We've done some, there's one of Darren's clients, actually, he's on the call here. Not sure if we can say the name of them, but it is a law firm who is now using ChangePilot, but they take the collateral we provide them, he's built it into a whole bunch of AI tooling. So he creates an internal AI generated video update of all those changes that they deem relevant, so he marks them all off with a tag, they get converted into an educational video, and that gets pushed out to his wider team across the business. And I saw a version of that 2 days ago, and it was impressive. And so he'd taken it to another level in terms of how you can push this out and get the whole business buying into it. It's, I challenge anybody who's bored. I'm not talking about when are we using AI, what are we doing with it, how does it add value? And if you just rely on Microsoft, say, we're going to save you 6 minutes a day, that's really hard to gain some traction. But what we're talking about here is how Ali and team can save a day. It's not just AI, but it's a lot of it is pushing the process to sort and filter and action, and that becomes quite tangible. So it's
and that's what firms need right now, right? Like so and actually it's not all going to sound like super cool but actually it is super cool because it stops from going
document management and data management. I know it's not sexy, it's not that exciting, but I know law firms especially spend millions of pounds on systems and also millions of pounds on Microsoft software and licensing. So how do you bring those two worlds together? How do you ensure it's compliant and continues? And I've had a few senior people in law firms say, give me a solution to something which is run of the mill and a real headache and a real pain. It's just not that sexy based on the headline. And so this is somewhere between the two. We're using some sexy tech to solve some challenging day-to-day pain points and mix the balance up.
Well, so thank you. Yes, because law firms have a million things that they're trying to achieve. They're trying to innovate. They're trying to stay compliant. You've got a million things that you're having to tick the box for, and amidst very sort of demanding clients and a speed of change that we've not seen before, which puts everybody under a huge amount of pressure. That has been really informative. Thank you so much for people listening in. Thank you, James. Thank you, Ali, for running. Thank you for the demo. That was really helpful. It's really great speaking to both of you. I really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thanks, Caroline. Appreciate you hosting, and thanks to everybody for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.